We are live.
Good evening. I would like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, October 14th at 7:30 p.m. I'm going to waive the chairperson's report. But certainly we have a new person at the board table. Welcome, Kylie. We look forward to hearing from you in just a few minutes. Okay. Next, I'll go to public comment.
Good evening. If you would like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you will have up to 3 minutes to comment.
Okay. With that, there's no raised hands and no one in the audience. So with that, I'll turn it to you, Dr. Byrne, for the superintendent's report, please.
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the October 7th Board of Education meeting. This past Tuesday, we launched our new district monthly newsletter, The Darien Difference. The publication is designed to give the community an inside look at the incredible things happening across all 7 of our schools. In each monthly issue, we'll spotlight one of our schools, diving deep into how they bring the vision of the graduate to life every day. A new issue will be sent by a school messenger at the end of each month, and you'll also find all published issues posted on the school district website under news and announcements. Our next step in building out our communication plan is to launch the official school district Instagram page, where we will post lots of exciting and informative happenings in our schools. Be on the lookout over the next few days for the Darien Public Schools Instagram page. Tomorrow evening, I'm attending the homeschool PTO meeting. Look forward to spending some time with the parents over there. And with the emergency closing at Darien High School on September 16th, we are required to make up that time for students. And on November 4th, we will have a half day of school for students at Darien High School with a modified schedule. The original school schedule did not have classes for students on November 4th. Ms. Dunn will be sending out a communication to families with all of the details. I've enjoyed attending some of our athletic competitions, and last week enjoyed varsity girls volleyball and varsity field hockey. I've also had a chance to attend varsity boys and girls soccer and varsity football as well, and look forward to attending more games this fall season. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you very much. Okay, and with that, I'll turn it to the student representatives. Nice to see you, Ryan and Kylie.
Yeah, great to have Kylie with us now, my partner in crime. So great to be here. Today, our girls soccer team and our boys cross country team both had events today. So hoping for the best for them. And then since we last saw you guys, DHS had our homecoming event, which included a football game, which we dominantly won. And then a homecoming dance, which was a great success. As last year, we also had the electric bull ride, and we had that long as well this year. Along with that, we are also searching for a new superintendent. So many of our students are engaging in focus groups to help provide information to a board to help look for a new superintendent as well.
Thank you, Ryan.
Hi, thank you all. I'm really excited to be here. For the music, there have been many DHS ensemble showcases in September, and we're looking forward to many new ones in November, including the choral concerts, the tenor bass showcase, the band concerts, and in theater, currently, Theater 308 is working on their fall production, the play Almost Maine. They perform the second week of November, and then looking forward to the springtime, the musical is The Lightning Thief. Thank you all.
Thank you. Ryan and Kylie, if you happen to know any student members who have participated in the superintendent search focus groups, or if you have yourself, please pass along the thanks of the board. It's one of our most important jobs, and we're grateful for the support of students in that work.
Yeah, we definitely will.
Thank you.
I will just add on that they were meant to meet with them that Tuesday morning that we had to cancel school. So they met this morning via Zoom. So thank you for twice to prepare for that.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Okay. The consent agenda, which we are doing for the first time. So we'll take questions along the way. Eric, you're going to walk us through it, but it includes the approval of the minutes, the financial report, and possible action on budget transfers, which I don't think there are any, and board committee reports.
Right.
Oh, we're there.
So the first step is a motion to
I'll just
approve
read
the
my motion.
consent agenda.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Dennis, seconded by Robin.
And then any questions or comments about any of the items on the consent agenda?
Okay.
Or
Question.
any discussion related to?
So I guess
Sarah.
my question is, normally Rich will go through the entire financial report. Did we still do that or?
That's the purview of the board, if you wish to still do that, or if you just want to go on any possible action that's necessary.
So, Rich, you're normally brief, but I would love to hear a consolidated briefing on, the financial report, when that comes around. The finance committee met on, September 12th, discussed the surplus, but quicker than you normally.
I'll be even briefer. It's a surplus of $490,000. It's largely from anticipated increases in excess cost revenue, some favorable salary turnover, and the new salary contracts we have in place for the paras and the custodians. We did have 6 transfers we talked about. One is to approve the extra elementary section that the board approved. One is to approve the .2 French teacher that the board also approved. We do have a vacant HVAC technician, and so moving money into contracted repairs, that remains vacant. The board did approve going forward with board docs, so that is one of the other transfers. And then, if you'll recall, during the budget season, we made a reduction, assuming the public benefit charge and electricity would go away. It did not go away. And so there's money going back into the electric account to fund the public.
Okay, and so that's a reminder to thank you to Katie and Dave for going through the board docs demo on behalf of the board. Appreciate that. Are there questions about anything on the consent agenda? And so when we approve it, that will also approve the transfers. Katie?
Just one process question. So this means that we won't be going through individual board committee reports unless someone flags it for an update or
Right,
discussion.
so like the curriculum report that Amy put together would be what you would typically see.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Of course, that doesn't mean questions can't come up before the meeting, during the meeting, after the meeting. We're not turning off questions. We're just updating how we handle the public.
And once you open the consent agenda with the motion, you can discuss any of the items on there. It's just one vote to approve all of it, except the minutes, the transfers, everything.
So were there any other questions on any of those things? No. Okay, with that, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? That's John, seconded by Joanna. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Which means the transfers are approved. Thank you. Okay. We'll move to presentations and discussions. We'll start with assessment data, and Dr. Byrne, I'll toss it to you to introduce it, please.
Great, thank you so much. So we're very excited to present some very positive data tonight, but you're going to see a bit of a different presentation than you have in the past. And so in thinking about the board's goal number 6 of focusing on governance, what you're going to hear tonight is an overview report of the data, and then what we learned from that and what we're doing with that. So that's where the conversation should sit. And it's us telling you this is where the performance was. We do some really good looks that Amy's going to talk through, cohort data over time. So we'll present all that out. I think, Amy, you're going to go with questions at the end would be best for you, okay? Because it's a new format for Amy as well. But I want to thank all the coordinators, chairs, and administrators here tonight because they all played a big part in this. But really, we're focusing on what we've learned and what that means for the work we're doing as a district.
Dr. Byrne. Okay, so tonight our team will share some results for the spring 2025 assessment. As Dr. Byrne mentioned, I'm going to give a very high-level overview. The memo in your packet that was previously included and distributed to you probably last week has background, additional details, including descriptors of each of the assessment types, and some statements regarding the outcomes for our student performance this past year. There are members of our administrative team who are here tonight, and we'll be able to take questions at the end. Thanks so much, Jeff. And again, thank you for holding your questions to the end. We have a lot of data to share, and we'll move through that right now. So the first thing I want to talk about is why we measure student learning. We measure student learning not just to celebrate and look at the scores that we have at the end and think about what the numbers are. We really want to think about how we can help every child succeed grow, and thrive. And data is a tool that we use in school systems, and we have lots of different types of data that we use for different purposes. So we do use data to inform our instructional practice. We use data to talk about achievement and growth, and the measures that we'll talk about tonight, Smarter Balance Assessment and NGSS, those assessments are looking at achievement and growth over time for our students. And then we also use other types of assessment to guide system level decisions when we think about improving needs for professional learning or thinking about curricular revisions. You've seen this before in the annual presentations. There are different assessment types. The universal screeners that you hear us talk about, those would include, for example, AIMSweb. AIMSweb is something that we would use, for example, in an MTSS process, and the board is anticipating a presentation on MTSS, I think in December. We use that data to kind of take a snapshot of how students are performing at a grade level and identify pockets of students that might not yet be performing at grade level. That's a broad overview of the purpose of that type of assessment. Formative assessments are really for the instructional purpose because they're in the moment assessments where a teacher can administer, see what the student knows, and respond readily in that moment at point of instruction for a child. Those are the most useful to us in schools. Summative assessments are the assessments we're going to talk about tonight. And while those don't help us intervene at the individual student level, this is the kind of assessment that helps us guide system level decision making. And that's for a few reasons. One specifically is by the time we get the assessment results, they're latent. We get them in September really to distribute them to families. Our families got them this year through Aspen for the first time ever. We were a year ahead in that type of distribution. And so when we have those assessments, students have already moved on to the next grade. They've moved on to different curricular areas. And so that's not the most useful data for a teacher for instruction. That's the kind of data, again, that we use to guide system level decisions. So let's take a look at strategic plan alignment. And I'm going to revisit this toward the end of the presentation. Everything that we're talking about tonight with regard to guiding system level decisions should connect back to the work in the strategic plan and the work that you hear us talk about at the board table. All right, so this is where we kind of get to into the numbers. If you look at this chart, this is a 3-year trend over time of the overall scores for the district. So this is for all tested areas. We know that Smarter Balanced Assessment for ELA and mathematics is assessing students in grades 3 through 8. And the science assessment, called the NGSS assessment, is assessing students only in grades 5, 8, and 11. What this data shows is that every year there is incremental growth year over year for this past year's data and the year prior. So that's a trend that we like to see. Something exciting that we want to talk about tonight briefly is that the high needs students who are recognized in that category, that subgroup, and those are students that receive ML services or special education services, or perhaps are identified to be eligible for free and reduced lunch. Those students really made significant gains this year, especially in mathematics. And you'll see that that's something that we look at. And again, we're looking at this data, we triangulate it with other data. For example, the universal screeners and the instructional data that we use to have a really broad perspective of how our students are performing. This data set looks at the individual grade level performance over a 3-year period for ELA Smarter Balance Assessment. And what this does show is steady growth year over year, which is reflective of consistent instruction. We will continue to focus our professional learning in the area of K-3 literacy because we recognize that that 3rd grade mark in students reading at grade level is indicative of their success in not only reading, but their success in all other subject areas really, including, I would say, probably mathematics. 4 through 8, we're going to continue to focus on writing, vocabulary, and grammar. Okay, so this is a new data set that we did not share last year, but I think actually one of the board members, it may have been you, Mr. Brown, that had asked about this, looking at cohort data. So this is actually not, how does our 5th grade do year over year? This is looking at kids as they move through the school system. And this data set is really helpful because if we look at this one right here, you might say, oh, what happened in grade 5? It looks like there was a little bit of a dip there. Well, that can be deceiving because if we look here, that 5th grade, when they were 4th graders, they performed better than they did as 4th graders. So we want to take a look at year over year, how are we doing at grade level, but we also want to follow and track groups of kids. And then I would argue, continue to argue, most importantly, we need to be looking at individual student performance. That's really like the money shot for us. All right, so we're looking at the cohort data over time. We'll see that we do have our kiddos growing consistently. I did point out the 5th grade there as an example. We're going to be thinking about vertical alignment and especially those transitional years between 5th and 6th grade, 8th and 9th grade. In fact, Dr. Falcone and I met, I think just yesterday, it seems like a long time ago. It was only yesterday with Kristen Colonies to be thinking about our frameworks, for example, for literacy instruction and how we're building out our MTSS framework to really strengthen preschool through grade 8. Let's take a look at mathematics. Oh, actually, I don't think I spoke enough about this. Let me just go back for one quick second to language arts. You will see that we are going to continue to embed SBA-like assessments into the curricular assessments that we use so that our children understand the language that's on the assessment. For example, you might have a student be thinking about what's the main idea, and in SBA, it's referred to as central theme. We want to make sure that our kids understand the language that's actually used in the assessments. Otherwise, it's not an accurate picture of what they really know and can do. All right, so for mathematics. Mathematics, this is again the 3-year trend for all of those grade levels. You can see that 3rd grade had the most significant growth. 8th grade, again, we're taking a look at it, not only the cohort data, but we're kind of flat there in the 8th grade. And so that's not surprising. Dr. Byrne and I were talking earlier this evening. They see kind of that same trend data in New York with the regions. Has to do with some of the content that's introduced in that grade. And it's also important that we recognize that the Smarter Balance Assessment and NGSS assessment, they have 4 levels, but there are also scale scores. And the scale scores are not an equal intervals for each of those levels. So sometimes you'll have a percentage of kids that can either bounce up from a 2 to a 3 or a 3 to a 4 or drop down. And it would make you think that there's a significant shift in performance, but really it is statistically insignificant when you look at the scale scores. So that's another data point that we would take a look at. This is the cohort data for mathematics. And again, what we wanted to point out here is that there is notable growth in the area of mathematics for students who are identified in the high needs subgroup. And again, that would be students that receive instruction through an IEP, through ML services, or are eligible for free and reduced lunch. Just earlier today, we had a session on SIOP, which is Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. And those are really high leverage instructional strategies that support our ML learners. And we had mathematics teachers in the room because, of course, literacy is a foundational component of how our students perform in mathematics. So we'll continue to be working on that.
Amy, ML is multilingual.
Multilingual learner. Thank you for catching me with that. Multilingual. ML is multilingual and MLL is multilingual learners. NGSS assessment. These are our 3-year results because I've already talked about the overview. The NGSS assessment 3-year results, we're happy to note that we've stayed steady last year in 5th grade and we had increases in grade 8 and 9. If you look at the overall data point for grades 5, 8, and 11, I said 9, it's really 11, 5, 8, and 11, you see a steady increase across those grades. It's a little harder to look at the cohort data here because this assessment is only administered in 3 grades. That's why I want to kind of take a minute and pause here and look at this data set. You might look and say, well, each of those classes has a different number of bars. Why is that? The class of 2029 is our current 9th grade class, but let's remember that the data is always a year old, right? So this is last year's data. So when they were in 8th grade, that class has only data points for their 5th grade assessment and their 8th grade assessment. And then you might say, well, what's going on with the class of 2027? We didn't forget to include the data, but I had to kind of walk myself through this several times as somebody who's always looking at the data. Why is there 1 bar there? In that case, our grade 11 students who were 10th graders last year, they have an 8th grade data point. They do not have a 5th grade data point because there is still that hangover period from COVID where they didn't have the assessment that year. And they have not been administered the grade 11 assessment yet because that happens in the spring. So again, I point out this is useful data, but it doesn't tell the whole story and it doesn't serve the purpose of really driving instruction. It's important to monitor for guiding district and systemic level decisions. With regard to our next level of work, we do think that that trend that you saw in the overall data could be attributed to the fact that we are embedding more of those NGSS-like assessments into our current curricula. And we're also thinking about instructional shifts that are aligned to the NGSS standards, to give kids that practice in their ongoing daily instruction and to build their confidence there. So we'll continue to strengthen three-dimensional instruction experience for students and linking to the vision of the graduate. All right. So for the high school, on September 9th, there was a presentation that Mrs. Dunn gave and Kathy Oster, Mrs. Oster, who's sitting in the back, they shared a lot of data points with you. I included many of those in your packet. And tonight I'm going to focus on two additional standardized measures, the Seal of Biliteracy and the Advanced Placement Assessment. This is a great new slide. Our number of students who are meeting criteria for earning a seal of biliteracy continues to grow year over year. We had 149 students, 149 seniors who earned the seal. As a reminder, students can earn the seal at any point in their secondary experience in the high school. However, they don't actually have the seal affixed to the diploma, and that's when they're considered to officially earn it until grade 12. There are students who meet that criteria, for example, in 10th grade. It's a really wonderful thing for a student to accomplish. It means that they are proficient in English and one other language. We have some students that have earned the seal because they are proficient in English, a home language, a native language, and another language that they've studied in school. So you can see that this year we have had students who have earned the seal of biliteracy in the courses that we teach in those sequences of French, Latin, Mandarin, and Spanish. And then we have some heritage speakers, and we supported their taking of the German and Russian seal of biliteracy stamp assessment, and they earned the seal as well. We offered so many AP courses, 25 of them across the 34 subjects. And what's really exciting about this data is that the number of students that are taking AP courses continues to increase. And the percentage of students that are scoring a 3, 4, or 5 continues to increase. So while we're opening and widening access, the performance remains consistent and very high. It actually improved. 95% we are of our students who took the AP exams who scored a 3 or above. And I know this was like a knock your socks off data point for Dr. Byrne. We were talking about this earlier. Last year, for the first time ever, we talked about the Next Generation Accountability Assessment. And this is an assessment that is meant to tell a community and a school system how a school and district are preparing students for post-secondary readiness, for college and career life beyond, for example, in our case, Darien High School. And there are 12 indicators that are meant to provide a holistic measure. And so things like achievement, like we talked about Smarter Balanced Assessment and NGSS measure achievement, they also measure growth because we're looking at anticipated growth that's predicted over time. This indicator set includes indicators for chronic absenteeism, college and career readiness, high school graduation, post-secondary entrance, physical fitness. I talk a lot with Chris Manfredonia about that piece, and access to the arts. And what this is we are measured against a target of how we're expected to improve year over year. And the state has a very complicated calculus for figuring this out. I will tell you that the different indicators are weighted differently. So for example, the growth targets are weighted more heavily than the achievement targets. So at the end of all of that, a school district is issued an accountability index score. Our score, and this is not an error. These scores are always latent, like a year behind. That's how the state publishes them. So again, it's like 51st states. I have to remind myself of this every year that I'm really on point with the 23-24 data. We anticipate the results from this past school year in November. But year over year, there was an increase in the Next Generation Accountability Index score from an 85% to an 88. The state is sitting around a 69%. One other thing that Dr. Byrne and I were talking about earlier today was the fact that when you're performing that high, and that's significant, that's a really impressive score, it's really hard to increase 3 percentage points. So I was pleasantly surprised when I saw that the calculus resulted in that. It's like, and I think I used this example last year, if you're running a 10-minute and 35-minute mile or 10-minute and 35-second mile, and you drop 10 seconds, That's not that hard. I shouldn't say that since I have not been running lately. But if you're running, a 4-minute and 9-second mile and you're trying to get to 4:05, I know from my son's experience, that's really challenging. Nevertheless, this is really about continuous improvement, and this is about our team really looking at not only these data points, but other data points that are more local assessments that we can more readily respond to at point of intervention and acceleration for our students to move the needle on student performance. And then I promised that I would go back and revisit the strategic plan alignment. And so as you know, these are some of the data points that we identified for metrics with goal area 1, enhancing teaching and learning. And the connection that you should see here tonight and throughout the year ahead is, so what are we going to do about this? And so some of the related focus work is, of course, the continued work in K-3 literacy, implementing a new resource, focusing on high quality instructional practices, thinking about refining the MTSS framework, which really is about leveraging local assessments and thinking about individual student performance and the whole child, thinking about NGSS 3-dimensional learning to ensure that children's daily experiences in their science classrooms and lab spaces are offering that type of learning experience. We recognize that we have some pretty important work to do in the area of curriculum writing and revision. That's continued work. We talk about that throughout the year. Assessment practices, thinking about, we talked about that actually in the last curriculum committee meeting, thinking about using varied assessments so that we can ensure that our students really can demonstrate what they know and are able to do. We'll talk a lot more this year about student success plans, because again, that gets to individual student performance. And then thinking about how do we organize professional learning so that it is targeted. The example today in providing professional learning around SIOP, which is that Sheltered Instruction Observational Protocol, which is really around supporting ML learners, multilingual learners, and thinking about high leverage strategies to support children. It's really good practice for all. And so thinking again about coordinating those efforts to move the needle on performance is something that we will continue to focus on. So it's the high level overview tonight. We're happy to take any questions. I want to again extend my gratitude, as Dr. Byrne did, to my colleagues who are here tonight from the departments and the buildings. And we could answer any questions about building and department performance that you might have.
Okay, board questions? I'll start then. So on the, if you go back one slide, where we went 85 to 88%, what do you think the difference is?
So one, it's having systems and structures to ensure that we're looking at data appropriately. I can give an example even with the Connecticut Physical Fitness Assessment. Ensuring, and that's a minor example, but ensuring that the assessment is appropriately administered and that we have systems in place to make sure that we're recording the right data accurately. And Dr. Byrne and I have talked about how looking at system data is really important, and we have some work to do in that area with regard to MTSS. But I really think it's about looking at data with a really focused lens, and then building systems in place and progress monitoring, not only student learning, but our adult work that leads to student learning.
Is there anything, in addition to looking at the data, is there anything you think that educationally we did differently?
So, Dr. Byrne and I have talked about, it's really hard looking at data year over year. And even though we're really proud of the 3 percentage points, to pinpoint one particular thing that might have contributed to that. I do think the increased collaboration within each of the levels, elementary, middle, and high, talking about instructional practice and sharing those practices more readily in collaboration time is definitely very helpful and is the strongest type of professional learning we can offer. And I think, the work it's really going to continue to be really important, strengthening those transitions. And we've started to do that a lot more, elementary to middle and middle to high.
And I would say to me, seeing the results for the students with high needs, that growth is incredibly important, because when you're achieving at the levels that our students are achieving, for most kids, that slight change is really hard. But our kids who need extra support and aren't at that very high level, if we're able to leverage that work we're doing in MTSS and the individual assessments, that's what's going to push the growth each year. So I think there has to be some connection to that metric there. And I think the more we continue to focus on that, as well as continuing to focus on practices for all kids, but that using that data really well is going to benefit all kids, but especially kids with high needs.
And as I mentioned earlier, in this calculus, the growth indicator and the indicator of growth for subgroups does receive a heavier weighting. And so because, as I mentioned earlier, for example, in math, there was a significant improvement that will result in a change in the index score.
Yeah, I think the other piece we should all keep in mind, some of you are not old enough to remember this, but the old George Michael sports machine on Fox, he would do that show on Sunday nights. The state's assessment system is a lot like George Michael's sports machine. So you have these bells and whistles and lights and things, and you don't know how it all figures it out, but they pump out numbers. So there, the reality is that we have to take these as, these are required assessments that we deliver. And we can say assessments, I usually say tests, because they are taken at one moment in time for kids. It's the work that our teachers are doing when they're sitting one-on-one, conferring with a child, reading with a child, or analyzing a lab that kids are doing in the classroom, or analyzing math problems that they're doing in the math classrooms. That's what's going to push kids' knowledge and skill and ability going forward. So these are great numbers to celebrate and talk about, but the reality is, what are we doing with the day-to-day information, which I think we've got a really good plan that we're working on.
We'll go down the table. Greg, sorry.
Wait, do you want to go first?
Go ahead, Joanna.
Okay.
So you mentioned that eighth grade is flat or maybe a little down, sorry, eighth grade math. But it seems like by the time they take the SAT in 11th grade, they've gone back up. So could you just give a little more detailed explanation, like what's happening in the eighth grade, either developmentally or
So I would say this is a New York issue as well. So a lot of it depends on where they put the cut scores. And I don't want to suggest, because I already got myself in trouble with New York Education Department enough. I don't need to get Connecticut on the list, but they play games with the cut scores, and you'll see it's a common eighth grade performance is often kind of funky. And you're wondering, why is that? These kids, look at what they're doing when they take the AP exams, look at what they're doing before then. So it's a little bit of a mystery, but there are things that we can take from.
There's usually that dip in the 5th and 8th grade data, and we were having an earlier discussion today, and I was somewhat comforted to know that New York has experienced the same phenomenon. Part of it is, the concepts are a little bit, there's a big jump in 5th and 8th grade, and then that cut score piece is deceiving of how kids shift up and down. It's really important to look at the end game and see where we're getting our kids. We also know that there are learning progressions, and so we want to be really careful with our curriculum writing, and that's something that we focus on to ensure that we're spiraling content and we're revisiting things. The other piece about this is kind of, probably a leading indicator and an input that's really important to know about some shift in the next accountability index number is that at the root of the work, we're having special educators write curriculum and think about the design of assessments with the department chairs 612 and alongside Dr. Falcone at the elementary level. So beginning with the end in mind for all kids is incredibly important, especially when we're thinking about the whole child with MTSS or thinking about a broad, diverse set of indicators like would be in the next gen report.
Thank you. Greg?
Thanks. First, Amy, is your son, I think you said, 409 miles? That's incredible. If that's that's bananas.
I know.
That's like.
That's a metric we should be talking
Pretty
about.
incredible. Can we
I'm
just
more
pause and 409 is like.
I'm more
that's it.
like 12 something. He doesn't wait for me.
I had just a couple of clarifications. So one is, it says percent at or above goal throughout this thing. What is determining the goal? Is that us or is that this?
So the state,
or?
there are scale scores and the state determines the cut scores for levels 1, 2, 3, and 4.
That's the cut scores that. Okay.
Yeah, and the state also determines what the growth targets are for the individual student and the growth targets for the Next Gen Accountability Index.
Got it. Okay, that sort of led into my next question, which is looking at the Next Gen Accountability Report. Like, there's a bunch of categories where we get 100% of max points.
Yeah.
It seems like a number of them where we're not are, academic growth. But how is that determined? Is that like we're already really high level, so how can we grow at 5% forever? It's not possible, obviously, so like, how is that measured?
So with regard to the growth index, right, it can be, this is what I think Dr. Byrne was talking about. This is why it's critically important for us to be thinking about MTSS, our framework, and aligning intervention services, whether it's students who are receiving tier 2, tier 3, or supports through special education, because those students, there are more gaps in their learning. And so it's harder to close gaps like that. It's harder to gain those points, which is why they're weighted more heavily. And the state determines that.
Right.
And yet, and yet, as Dr. Burns said also, when we look at the cohort year by year, we've seen significant growth in what the state deems as high need students.
Yeah. I think that I think there was, you made a bunch of comments around like missing data. Obviously, this is a starting point. I think like as we go forward, it'll be great as we fill in those gaps, and then we'll have like a lot more data as we go forward to be able to make, better informed decisions.
So for example, in the training this afternoon, we were looking at a data point of student performance in ELA, and there was an indicator where our whole population was sitting at like 88%. And when we were looking in particular with the students who are identified as multilingual learners, they were at 70%. 70% is still fantastic when you look at what students are expected to do when they come to the country, and they might be, newcomers. But there's a lot of discrepancy between the score of that newcomer and the whole population. And so that's kind of what results in the calculus here.
Great, thank you.
Dave, anything? Not yet.
No, I mean, I would just note that the, trend upward in the next gen report seems to track with Amy's time in district. So thank you.
Oh, I will say that this is largely the work of the people sitting over there and all the people out in the schools, most importantly, our kids. So our staff and our students. So thank you. I was pretty excited when I saw this though. It's like knock your socks off.
You're not the only one.
I think we'll do our best and we can still do better and better.
I just wanted to comment that I really appreciate the way that you opened to this, and then Dr. Byrne, the way that you reinforced this too, about the difference between standardized tests and big sort of content blocks versus how our teachers are really looking at what the students are doing every day and what that means in terms of their comprehension and our adjustments. So that right there, I think is just a really, really salient point. So thank you. I did want to ask about the classification on high needs students. And thank you, Amy, for defining it as the state does. In the special education community, we talk about high needs students differently. So am I understanding you correctly that the state classification is including anyone with an
Yes.
IEP regardless of what that specific, okay. So
Yeah,
there's
so-
really the whole range of every type of learner
So-
in that.
Katie, thank you for asking that. I would defer to Shirley. For the purposes of this presentation and the state definition, it is high needs any student who receives any type of service, instructional related service, or ML, or is identified to receive free reduced lunch. But there are different forms of the standardized assessment, the CTAA, CTAS. I don't know if Shirley you wanted to talk about any of that, but this is including all of our kids.
So it's with the exception of the CTA, which is the Connecticut Alternate Assessment, which is the test that is given to a very small percentage, usually about 1 or less than 2% of the students who receive a portfolio assessment based on the standards, but based on what their current levels of performance are.
Dennis.
So in keeping with the sports theme, I kind of want to go and do Len Berman and span the world and see, do we have, or can we go and find our cohorts, next generation accountability report? Can we see New Canaan Weston and see how well they do or not?
They only do it for the district, right? It's not, do they do individual?
So are you asking the next gen accountability index for another district?
Yeah,
Yes.
just to compare ourselves to them and see how well or not we're doing versus, and see so
That's-
Is that on the public, the
on
public
NSA
website? The Connecticut
NSA.
Public Data Site.
Thank you.
Dr. Boone Bonds, I can say.
Robin.
Thank you for all of this. I wanted to ask a couple questions. First of all, do you feel as administrators that we have sufficient technology and data capability to really effectively drill down to the building and grade level? You mentioned a data portal here, so that's one question. I mean, do you have the support and the necessary things that you need in order to make this instructionally valuable? So that's one question. And then secondly, then how often and how frequently are the teachers getting to the level where they can actually modify and adapt instruction based on some of this data? So that's kind of two questions, just for, the support, and maybe potentially budgetary needs as well in order to enable that. And then the feedback loop in terms of more real-time instructional changes, and then the curriculum revision cycle,
Right.
where I would imagine we're also modifying or like changing things in order to address gaps.
I would say for individual students, so I think that was your middle question, this isn't particularly helpful.
Right.
Because of when you get it. So, but for the systematic and the system level change, that certainly is impactful. And I think Amy's been speaking to that a bit, but I just wanted to say for day-to-day instructional purposes, those in-house and the assessments the formative assessments that Amy talked about earlier, those are the ones that are really going to dictate what change do I make on Tuesday based on what I learned about the student on Monday.
Okay.
And your first question is a really important one, thinking about a data portal. And actually one of the elements of the strategic plan, right, is thinking about how do we use technology efficiently so that our cognitive load can really be on planning for instruction and making sure we're growing the capacity of our staff. We have been talking, Dr. Falcone, some of the department chairs, Tim McGuire, around is our data portal that we currently use efficient in supporting that work? So that the data isn't just collected, but that it's really being used and leveraged to inform and instruction and move the needle for student performance for individual kids. And as we're making some shifts with our MTSS framework, it's causing us also to look at that. We currently use a data portal called the RTI Studio. It is not particularly user-friendly. I think it does cause some frustration for our staff. I'm not surprised. I had experience with that in another life. And so we also have staff that are really, really bright and committed who've developed some wonderful systemic tools using Google Sheets. We have to be very careful thinking about student data privacy laws and making sure that whatever we create is sustainable. And we don't know if the prototype that we're building in-house is really sustainable over time. So in short, there are a few different options that we're looking at that are different, that have different platforms that would allow us to do this data analysis more efficiently and more effectively plan for instruction for individual and small group instruction. So I would anticipate that probably through, if not this budget cycle, the next one, you would hear about that.
Thank you.
Did you have a third question about the curriculum cycle?
Oh, and the revisions. I mean, I would imagine that part of our curriculum revision cycle would then also be looking at the areas where we see achievement gaps and then kind of going back and modifying curriculum, or is that happening?
Thank you for that reminder too, Jill. I had that written here. Yeah, so if you remember, we do have that 7-year cycle and it begins with an impetus for change, which might be something like play-based learning legislation or new standards in social studies. We also have, the different stages through that 7-year cycle. And one is thinking about instructional shifts. The other stage 2 really is around assessments. So when we take a look at this assessment information and the feedback that we get, we do look deeper, more deeply, I should say, into the claims that come out for student performance. And then we start to think about, do our assessments match? Are we asking students to perform in the same way that the standardized assessment is? Are we ensuring we're doing a gap analysis and looking at the standards? So that work is ongoing, and the department chairs really lead that work in each of their department areas. And that is really important professional learning that they do with their staffs, because as they're looking at the assessment data and they're thinking about the standards, that's really professional learning when we're thinking about curriculum revisions. And that's a strength of, I think, how we approach curriculum writing in districts.
Thank you.
Sarah? I'm good. I have my questions have been asked. Thank you.
John?
So I'm a sucker for AP scores and the AP data. And when I look at the ascent in terms of the AP student count.
Mhm.
You know, we're up to 528 students in 2025, but is there a total accounting for, I know that's the number of students in a given year, but when you look at the percentage of students at Darien High School that ultimately take one or an AP course, do we have a percentage for that at all? And I probably should ask that before this meeting.
I would ask Kathy Astor or Mrs. Dunn, do you keep that type of data at DHS?
Yes.
The answer.
So yes, Mr. Seedy, yes, the answer is yes. And while it's not here readily, it's also something that we could provide if Dr. Byrne asked us to.
Yeah, and
do
I'm
so
sorry, I
going
should have
forward.
prepped
No,
with the question before it, but.
Yes, they changed the name of the report. It used to be called the Equity and Access Report, and it would give you the percentage of students in the graduating class who took an AP class at any point. So I can get that data for you.
Okay, no,
for
that's
this
great,
one.
because again, I'm looking at the trends and, you know, then I look at the percentage of total AP students with scores 30 plus, 95% ascending. And again, it gets tougher and tougher to get that ultimate outcome of 100%. But, you know, I look at AP classes, maybe this is a flawed view, but, you know, culmination of their education through the system and the ability for our student body, 95% of them to score 3 or better, which in many schools gets them a college credit, is amazing. So I just wanted to call that out in terms of how that kind of fits into the vision of the graduate, which you highlighted when you first came on. And then I'd just love to say that this whole presentation is awesome. It comes to culmination, what I think Greg and others were seeking, you know, only a year or so ago. And the data cuts through, I find, you know, if you look through it, a lot of the noise that we've encountered as a board, as a community, and, you know, as board members and everybody out there, you know, I want to trumpet this news, not because we're a great district, but, you know, this is, as Amy said, this is 23, 24 data. This is only 3 years after COVID. So it shows that even though we have ever so slight dip, the rebound that we've had and the dedication of our educators to get to these points. So I deeply appreciate you pulling it together like this and all the work you got us.
Our pleasure. It's celebratory for all of us. We're really proud of our kids and our staff, and we'll continue to strive for, you know, always continuous improvement too. Just, you know, thank you for recognizing that about the AP and college and career credit for kids to take off with them, but the SAT data triangulates with that. So that's another exciting thing. It's not just that one data point.
Yeah, I view as APs a lot different than SATs because you can prep for SATs. It's a lot, whole different animal in the AP world. And then to hear, at least anecdotally, my kids say some of their classes at Darien High School were tougher than their engineering class in the college.
100%.
Pretty amazing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Just one additional question on the seal of biliteracy, which is really phenomenal that 43% of our seniors have gotten that. The question I had is, do we have a breakdown of which languages, you know, the number of students or percentage of students? Was it primarily Spanish, or, you know, did we have a lot in Mandarin as well? And I'm just curious, kind of just the breakdown, if we had that available.
It is primarily in Spanish. I don't have that right at the moment. I'm not sure if my colleagues do in the room, and if not, if
we can
Dr.
get-
Byrne would like, we can.
Yeah, we can
Share with the
follow
board.
up with
In a
the
memo.
questions in a memo.
Thank you.
I have one more question myself on seal of biliteracy. Does ASL qualify as a language that you can receive the seal for?
It does, yeah.
Okay, so we
As far
should
as
start
I
to
know.
see this show up in a year or two. Great.
This year we did level 3, so we're at ASL 3.
Okay,
So we'll have information also. And hopefully next year we'll be at ASL 4.
great.
That's a spoiler alert for the curriculum committee meeting. Settle.
Any other questions on this topic? And John, thank you for that summary. No, okay. All right, thank you all for the work. And we look forward to seeing what this looks like through the year.
Great, thank you all.
Okay, in terms of the work you do. All right, great. Personnel report, March, big news.
So the big news is that the 3 openings that we have, 2 elementary special education teachers and 1 speech and language pathologist, are all due to people who left on or after the first day of school.
So I continue to be disappointed that teachers do that, knowing that there are kids in the classroom that need to be serviced, but we're working hard to try to fill those 3 positions. And paras are a little more transient, but as far as teaching positions go.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Excuse me. Okay, follow-up action items. We have a couple of items from this presentation. I think there were 2 questions or
Yep,
maybe 3.
and we'll get those back on the memo. That's the percentage students on the AP courses and
And
the
equity and
follow-up on the
access.
languages.
Okay, great.
In that link,
Oh,
in the link
language.
that
Yep.
Dennis could look at.
Oh, yeah, the
Sure.
Ed site link.
All 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other, did I miss any other follow-up items? No, okay. With that, we'll move to public comment.
Good evening. If you'd like to participate in public comment, please approach the podium and wait to be recognized. Once recognized, please state your name and address for the record and note that you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Nobody.
There's no one online and there's no one up here at the podium. So thank you all. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn? That is Joanna, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? That is unanimous.